I'm not.
Is it time? It is. It's 7:01.
7:01.
Hey,
Let's go.
everybody.
We're ready.
How you doing?
Where's
I
everybody
know more
else?
people are going to be popping in, but we can start since it's past 7. The first thing that we like to do, if we have time, and it looks like we may have time, is have everybody jump in for just 30 seconds and just talk about what you're working on and also what you would like Mark to talk about. If you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat room and he can go through them one at a time and make sure that if there's duplicates, he's not,
Busy.
So basically, we're going to introduce myself last. And why don't we start with Stephen Siwak?
Siwak.
You're on.
Hi, everybody. Up until this crazy pandemic, I had been a entertainment engineer designing sets and props and mechanisms for Broadway shows and Vegas shows. Always been very interested in filmmaking, and I have a short 15 or so minute script that I'm hoping to produce once the stay-at-home, the curfew orders are lifted, and we no longer have fires in the street and COVID in our lungs and all that other happy, wonderful stuff. So I'm here to listen about how I might be able to make this happen.
Yeah, we live in interesting times.
Yeah, isn't that unfortunate?
Yeah.
No, I don't think.
All right. Let's see. James Scheinbaum, would you like to introduce yourself and say what you're working on and what you'd like Mark to answer?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Mark. We spoke earlier. He's unbelievable, and I'm happy to learn anything he could teach me. So
I'll pay you later, James.
okay. No, it's true. He's smart. He's very. So I would like to know a little bit though about.
I don't know. Please, this for school.
Well, my one thing though, I would like to know a little bit more about how the contracts are looking with the pandemic. That I would like to hear.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Let's see. J.A., I don't know what your name is, but if you would like to introduce yourself and what you're working on and what you might like Mark to answer.
Hi, I'm Jordan.
Hey, Jordan.
I'm currently not working on anything. I'm just here to learn from fabulous Mark Jacobson and crew.
Okay. John Kay.
Yeah. What this is like.
Can anybody hear him?
No.
No. All right. If you can always put something in the chat room if we can't hear you. Winsome Lennon, would you like to introduce yourself and say what you're working on? Or not? Okay.
Where's the song?
Yeah. Norman Daniels, you're on if you would like to introduce yourself.
Where is it?
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yes, I'm Norman Daniels. I'm currently a student at Digital
Can
Film
you hear
Academy. Can we all hear me or?
Yes. We can hear you.
Oh, outstanding. Yeah, and I basically I make a lot of films, technically films that happen to, well, shock people and horrify and all that good stuff, but all in good fun, obviously. I've had to be my own production company because of that sometimes, but going with the school, however, I've gotten a great opportunity to really see what a great film crew is about, and thus far we've put together some very interesting things, and definitely look forward to this meeting and everything it entails.
Okay. Let's see. Ikils, I-K, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but
my
Yeah,
God,
Iklil
I
Sari.
was making
Iklil
a
Sari.
video. I think I'm leaving. That's all.
talking, if people can put themselves on hold if they're not speaking, it would be helpful because I'm picking things up.
Yeah, everyone
Okay.
should just mute themselves
Yeah.
until Deborah calls on you, and then stay muted through the whole thing. I'll answer questions through chat. But I just want to know what folks are doing.
Okay, sorry, Ikil, you're back.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Iklil Sari. Yes. Hello, everyone. Iklil Sari. I'm architect and students in filmmaking in Digital Film Academy, actually. So I'm working a documentary about the secret of the soul. And yeah, I'm wondering about this question for a while, and I started my documentary, and I want to learn more and to see how to make it perfectly.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Meredith, would you like to introduce yourself? I don't think you can hear me. Meredith Abrams?
Meredith Abrams, what are you working on? What are you doing? Now you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's just move along. Tim Donahue, what are you working on?
Hi, Deborah. I'm actually right now have one movie in development, and we've actually switched producers. So we're just kind of waiting to get the new people on board. We've got a director and a screenwriter attached, but the production company has switched on us. So I'm just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for those papers to be signed.
Okay. Christopher Huddleston. Hi.
Yeah, hello. I joined because Mark is my lawyer, and I'm working on a few other projects. I'm doing consulting right now for Fox, and then looking at some other projects.
Okay. Umair?
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. You still talking or?
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
So basically, I'm an actor, and there's a film coming out of mine. It's a short film, and more importantly, I'm doing a film in America, and it's still in development. And I had a question to ask to Mark. Should I ask it now or later?
No, put it in the chat room, okay? And then he's going to go over the questions at the end.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. David.
Hi, I'm a writer-director, and got one of my shorts just accepted into the Long Island Film Festival, so Expo, so happy about that. I'm just developing 2 features at the moment, and about to start writing a TV project.
Tony Dioniso, I think it is.
Hi, how you doing? Tony Dionisio, filmmaker. I'm working on a short film and a concept trailer for a sci-fi project. Hopefully we'll be shooting real soon, I hope, probably end of summer. Also, my last short film was invited to the Life Film Festival, which Debbie knows about. So we're excited about that as
She
well.
is the Long Island International Film Expo.
Yep.
A part of it.
So,
Okay.
so hopefully that'll be exciting, and I'll meet some of you fine folks there.
Okay. Peter? You have to hit unmute if you'd like to introduce yourself.
So I'm working with the Thelonious Monk estate, developing a documentary on Thelonious Monk's iconic Round Midnight.
Peter, do you know Doug Holloway?
He and I are doing this together. And
Give him my regards, please.
Well, he's the one that told me to come and listen to you.
Oh, okay.
Jason K, did we do you yet? You're all beginning to look
No.
alike to me, so.
No, you did not. I'm here just to pick up whatever knowledge seems to come my way. I recently, before the quarantine hit, I finished an entire pitch package on the Film Festival Travel Guide docuseries, which I was going to pitch actually next week at Real Screen. And unfortunately, that's been delayed. And now I'm working on a swing music documentary about the late 90s into the early 2000s, which I was a part of before I jumped into horror. So I'm looking to get any knowledge I can get. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Paul, did we do you? We didn't do you yet, right? Okay. It didn't sound right.
And my name is Paul Morrill. I've known Mark for many, many, many years.
His entire life.
My entire life, being that we are related. I'm a lighting and production designer. I was glad to see that Mark was doing this, and I just love contracts. And I could use a couple more of them because it's a little slow in the world today. And it's good to see you, Mark.
Yeah.
Jim Cook.
Hi, everyone. I'm a filmmaker, and I used to help out the foundation. I used to help out Deb, so I was also a judge as well. I did a short little PSA, if you could call that, called Battle of the Gloves. It's just about COVID-19 related pollution. I got really annoyed seeing that on Long Island, so I just whipped up something real fast. Not working on anything right now, but I'm leaning towards something involving fiction and green screen, but I have always wanted to know more about contracts because I think contracts are key. So here we are.
Shauna Brandel.
Hey everybody, I'm Shauna Brandel. I'm from In the Garage Productions. You may notice my background. Kenneth Frank is my producing partner and, you know, parenting partner. So I get to sit in because I DIY all of our contracts and whatever. I bungled my way through our first round of SEC filings, which was super fun in January. For the feature that will be, fingers crossed, was supposed to shoot last week, and we're tentatively scheduled for August 1st. We do micro budget features.
Who did I not call on yet? Danny, would you like to introduce yourself? Or not? Okay, who put your hand up if there's somebody I didn't call on yet, because you're all moving around. Oh, there's Danny, okay.
Sorry, I unmuted my phone, but didn't unmute it on the computer. Hi, I'm Danny Nakotra. I'm a fellow filmmaker and director. Currently, what I've been working on has been on hold, not only because of COVID, but also because I'm not one of the lucky people that's able to do the filmmaking work full time. So I do have a full-time job that's demanding a lot of my attention. So a lot of the film stuff is on pause for me for both of those reasons.
Anybody else I miss? Okay, well, first I'm going to introduce myself. Actually, hey, John, you there? Are you hiding? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Popping in. I'm Debbie's husband, mostly. I'm a cinematographer, grip gaffer, audio, boom up, whatever. And I basically do whatever Deb tells me.
There's lots of us in that group, John, don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'll introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Debbie Markowitz. I am the Nassau County Film Commissioner. I'm also involved with the Long Island International Film Expo, and we're working on all that right now, the scheduling and putting the festival together. I'm also a writer-director, do occasional casting, and in fact, I just saw a bleep come up before that I think I'm about to go to picture lock on my feature. Yes, this has been years trying to get this baby done. And then I've got a series that's also in post, and I cleared so far 3 films since we've been in pandemic mode that I got for post-production. So looking really forward to getting back to writing. It's the only thing I haven't been able to do much of yet. So I'm really thankful for a couple of things. One is we have Don Cato here who can introduce himself, but I just will mention that Don is from the Queens World Film Festival, and he's basically co-hosting this. So let me throw it over to Don. Unmute yourself.
Don, you're on mute.
So that's why Mark gets the big dollars. Knows when to turn the client on and off. So I've known Mark for some time. He worked on a project of mine a while back. And Deborah and I, we've known each other for quite a long time. And some of you, there's a couple in here who are students. I teach at the Digital Film Academy. I'm also a filmmaker, and I'm the artistic director of the Queens World Film Festival. I made a whole bunch of films all the way back to 1971. I'm currently working on a short doc, which is a musical with deaf people. And I'm restoring a 35mm movie I made back in 1986. So that's what I'm currently doing. And I'm looking forward to this because there's a lot of new things out there with finance. And Mark, if anybody in the world knows what's going on, he does. So whatever he says, ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully.
Okay.
About it.
Now, my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mark Jacobson, who I've known for, I don't know, 30 years. Can it be?
Yeah.
It's been a long time. Mark's been involved with the foundation. He still helps us out. He's my oftentimes entertainment attorney. And if everybody could just basically put themselves on hold at this point and on mute. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat room and Mark will answer them after his speech. So Mark, thank you and go ahead.
Thanks. I have the chat room open, so when you type them, send them. You can send it to me or to everyone, whichever you want, and I'll take a look at them, no problem. And thank you for being on mute. Aside from my little biography there that you read before signing up, maybe, I'm licensed to practice in New York, California, and Florida. I taught entertainment law at Fordham University, City University, and the New School. I founded the New York State Bar Association section on entertainment, arts, and sports law about 30 years ago. I'm still active. And I've been doing this for a very long time. You can look me up and get more information about me at markjacobson.com. So we're going to take the position that we're going to make a narrative fictional feature because it covers just about everything you need to know there. If you're doing a doc or a short, if your short is a feature, everything that I'm going to tell you applies. If you're doing a documentary, the basic only difference is how you acquire your rights. So if you have written a script and you've sat down and you've typed it on your computer and you're now proud of it and finished with it, you own the copyright in that script, all right then and there at that moment when it's fixed in a tangible medium of expression. You don't have to do anything. But if you think someone has stolen it from you, you absolutely must file a copyright registration certificate and have that certificate in hand before you file the lawsuit. That's important. So you own the copyright. Now, if you're going to go out and make a movie, you're likely going to use an LLC or a corporation to do that because if something goes wrong on the film and someone gets hurt, you don't want your personal assets to be at risk. So you want only the assets of the corporation to be at risk. So if you're going to form an entity, you need to get the rights from you, the author of the script, into the entity. So you're going to need an assignment of copyright or an option agreement or both or any combination. But you need to have a piece of paper that transfers the rights from the owner of the script to the entity which produces the film. It is fundamental. If you wrote the script and then you form a company and you raise money in that company to make your film and the entity doesn't have the rights to your film, you've committed fraud because you can't produce that film because you don't have the rights. I mean, you can go out and buy the rights, but at the moment you raise that money, you didn't have them. So you may have misled your investors. So you can commission someone to write that script if you have an idea. And say, this is what I have in mind, will you write the script? And when they do write that script, then you as the commissioning party, provided you have a contract with the writer that says so, will own the script as what we call a work made for hire. So I'm paying you to write the script. Because I'm paying you, I will own it, and we have signed an agreement to that effect. This work for hire concept is extremely important in films. Whenever you get anyone to work on your film, they also have to sign a contract. Every person who works on a film has to sign a contract. It can be really short, but it has to have two important or three important elements. One, how much they're getting paid. Two, the contract must say that the party's work is as a work made for hire for you, the employer. And three, that once they sign that the agreement, the person who signs the contract agrees that if there's a breach of the contract, they cannot sue to enjoin the release of the picture, because that is possible. So if I hired someone to be a key grip and he didn't sign a contract and I didn't put his name and the credits on the picture like I was supposed to, it is possible that he could stop the picture from being released. Not likely, but it's possible. If he signs a contract that waives that right, he can't do that. So those three things are important in every single contract. Okay, so now we have now you have found the property that you want to buy, and you enter into what's called an option agreement, which says that I, as the producer, want to buy one of Debbie's scripts. And I say to Debbie, I will give you a sum of money, and you will give me the exclusive right for a period of time to turn that script into a motion picture. Typically, the sum of money is 10% of the amount ultimately paid, and the term is 18 months. And if in that 18-month period I can't get the picture off the ground, I can buy another 18 months from Debbie. But during that time, she can't sell it to anybody else. And I get to revise the script and do whatever I want to it to make it so that it can get made. That option agreement is part of the chain of title, because then when I finally exercise my rights under that option agreement, I send her a letter. I say, I'm exercising my rights. Here's the rest of your money. I now own the property. I'm going to go make a movie. That part of this is chain of title. It's extremely important to have chain of title. If you don't have chain of title and you're going to use a SAG actor, SAG won't let you hire that actor because they require chain of title, your distributor requires chain of title, and your insurer requires chain of title. So these writer agreements and option agreements, and if you have a book on which your script is based, you need rights to that. All of that are part of the chain of title. You must have those links. Is everybody? One person has just written to me that they are having trouble hearing me. Is that common? Yes? No? No? Okay. So now once we have this entity formed, it's usually an LLC which people form. And the reason we use LLCs and not corporations is because it's easier to create different levels of financing, and it's easier to structure the deal the way most deals are structured. Financing deals are structured in an LLC as opposed to a corporation or any other entity. Typically, this is important to know. I was used to teach this at the New York Film Academy for a couple of years. I was teaching film financing, and every year it always surprised me at the number of people who don't understand the basic deal for financiers. And that is the financiers, let's assume one guy puts up all the money for your picture. His deal is he gets all his or her money back first before anybody else gets any money. All the money he put up got spent on salaries and rights and sets and costumes and music and all that stuff. So people got paid with his money. But when the picture is ultimately sold and the money comes in, all that money goes back to the investor, typically until the investor receives all of his money back plus 20%. And then that investor will get 50% of the net profits. You as the producer will get the other 50%. But you have to share yours with everybody who participates as a net profit participant. The writer will get some, the director will get some, sometimes your actors will, sometimes your brother will for having done something for you on the side. However you want to do it, all of those people participate, and you as the producer pay that. A rule of thumb I like to tell producers is if they end up with 25 to 35% of the net profits of the picture, they've done it right. I had a client who had to give away 45% of the net profits to get her picture off the ground, but she got the picture off the ground. It, of course, didn't make any money, and that's a challenge. You should also be aware that over 80% of all movies made do not recoup their investment. So if you're going out to raise money, you really shouldn't tell anybody that they're going to get their money back, because odds are they won't. And if you put together business plans to raise money in your LLC, I would caution you very hard against doing that, because your business plan will often carry with it a projection, and you'll show the great results from the Blair Witch Project, or I'm going to date myself, to Eating Raoul and other fantastic films that made a boatload of money for very little investment. But you won't show the films that lost all their money. And since you won't show all the films that lost all their money, you're not presenting an honest picture of what happens. So if you do have an operating agreement and you are raising money from more than one person, you'll have an agreement among all the investors that says what I just said. They put their money in, they get it out first, they get 20% premium, and then they get the rest. And you as the producer run the show for their benefit. They don't have a vote. They'll call you up and say what's going on, but they can't vote in the company by and large unless something major happens. And they're going to sign a subscription agreement that says, I am an investor in this property and I understand this stuff. Now, here's some other basic advice I give to people about film investing. If you were to buy stock in a company on the public market, you would get a big big memorandum, an initial public offering memorandum that screams for 35 or 60 pages, don't invest. A private placement memorandum for a film will do the same thing. It'll go on for 35 or 50 pages saying what's wrong with investing in this property. But you don't want to do that. First of all, it costs a lot of money in lawyers. And secondly, it's not worth it, because what that is designed to do is to make it so that an unsophisticated or unaccredited investor gets full disclosure under the Securities Act and knows all the risks about investing in a film. But my advice to you is to never sell to someone who is not accredited. And the reason I don't want you to sell to anybody who's not accredited is if they give you $5,000, $10,000, that money is going to be dear to them. They're going to call you up regularly and try to find out what happened to their money. When are they going to get it back? When are you going to start shooting? How come it's not done yet? Well, you finished 3 months ago. You can't get the music? What's wrong with you? And you'll have all those questions. But if you go to an accredited investor, and an accredited investor is what we like to call a millionaire without excluding the value of his house, or someone who makes over $300,000 a year for 3 years, that person who invests $10,000 or $25,000 or $50,000 can afford to lose it. And odds are he or she will not call you every other day to find out what's going on with the investment. They already know they're likely to lose the money. They already know that you're going to do your best, but they won't ask you for that stuff. So in our subscription agreements, we prepare the operating agreement. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. And the subscription agreement contains about 40 different risk factors that would also appear in a private placement memorandum. We put it in the subscription agreement. And when they sign up, they say, I understand all the risks. So you've protected yourself, you've saved money, you've limited the number of people you talk to, and you end up with a group of people who are serious about film and back you and understand what's going on there. So that's what I advise there. Something with regard to development investors is very important. And that is that they take the highest risk. So they typically should get the highest return. So if you're all set to go into production and you raise the entire budget, let's say it's $1 million and you've raised $1 million and everything's going hunky-dory, you don't need to worry about what your development investor got. But if you need to raise $50,000 or $100,000 to pay the screenwriter and hire the director and make sure they're working together, and then you want to find a location or you need a piece of music to make the movie, you have to go out and buy that stuff in advance. That development money gets spent even if the production money never gets raised. So in that case, the amount of money you're going to make, their risk is the highest. So what we do is we offer those development executives or investors a better deal. They get the same deal for their investment that they would if they invested in the property anyway. But if their investment would have netted them, say, 5% of the net profits of the picture in the ordinary course, I recommend to the producer that they give them another 5% out of the producer's side. So the development investor gets 2 for 1. They're getting twice as much equity for the one investment because they're putting it up so early, and they're going to make that much more money. So that's what we do. Their deal is typically the same, 120%. There's other nuances on that we can get into, but that's typically how I recommend we do that. Okay. So now we have raised our $1 million. We have a film. We have an option agreement. We have a chain of title. We have our, let's say, 10 investors, each who put up $100,000 to make our movie. And now we have to go hire everybody. And again, the director has to have an agreement. The writer already has an agreement. Each of the producers has to have an agreement. The department's heads have to have an agreement. And they all have to have those 3 provisions in them that I mentioned. But they also have to describe what these people are going to do. So when you're shooting $1 million film and you think it's going to take you a month to shoot, odds are not every actor is going to be there for all 20 shooting days. So you need to describe what days they're going to be there for and when they're going to leave. It's very important not to put a firm stop date on an actor's agreement, because you don't know if you're going to be able to let them go. If you give them a firm stop date and you miss it, you may never get them back because they're going to go on to their next property. So you need to be careful about that in your actor agreements. And all of your production agreements in that case have to be done in a nice little package. And that really is the bulk of what we do as lawyers. We make sure all those agreements are done properly. Now, when you get into the bigger budget pictures and even the low budget pictures, you're going to need to worry about unions and guilds. Most pictures these days at least have one SAG-AFTRA actor in them, and as such, you're going to have to sign up with SAG. SAG has an ultra low budget contract. They have a low budget contract. They have a modified low budget contract, and they have a basic agreement. Each one of those provides for different benefits and different costs, but SAG has to be involved. As I said, they look at that chain of title, they make sure you have the money, and if you are on a basic agreement where you're paying people, I think it's over I forget what the number is, it's over a relatively low number. That basic agreement will require that you have to bond your actors. So if your cast budget in your picture is $342,000 and you're using cast members, SAG members, you have to put up $342,000 with SAG in addition to paying the actors directly. You have to put up twice the money. Then when production is over and they have verified that everybody's paid, they will eventually give you back the money. It will be very, very difficult for you to get that. You have to certify that. Then when you get into distribution agreements, SAG will require a foreign residuals bond, which is also a hotly negotiated item, which is based upon the estimated revenue that the picture is going to do in foreign markets over the next 2 years. They want to make sure that that money is set aside. You can get your distributor to pay that for you, but they won't release the bond until that money is paid. SAG is very difficult to work with. You must sign with SAG before you hire an actor. Similarly, if you hire a writer who is a member of the Writers Guild, you must sign with the Writers Guild before you hire that writer. And Writers Guild and SAG and the DGA each have pension, health, and welfare contributions that are significant. Up to around 20% of what you otherwise pay them gets added on to satisfy those items. And it can be a big deal. I'm working with a client now who has run out of money and can't pay the PG&H for certain writers, and as a result, my client has been blacklisted on his picture. So he won't be able to make any other pictures until he satisfies that. And on the Directors Guild, it's important to have a director sign, let me go back for a second. A Directors Guild contract does not need to be signed before you hire the director. But when the director is about to start pre-production work, the Directors Guild agreement must be signed. Very often, a director will sign a development deal with you, the producer, so that the director will work with the writer to create a script that they both think is worthwhile. That deal with the director for a modest amount of money for an extended period is not subject to the DGA agreement unless you actually are a DGA member. So my advice is to not become a DGA member until you absolutely have to, because again, the P&W becomes very significant and their involvement in the production becomes very intense. Okay, so now we finished the picture. You now are going to have to engage oftentimes a post-production supervisor who's going to help you pull all the post-production elements together. You're going to have a contract with them. I've done them that are open-ended. I've done them at flat fees. But the post-production supervisor will marshal all the assets, get everybody to do their job, and to do it well and on time. You're going to have to deliver elements to the distributor or the lender or whoever else requires these elements. I've seen delivery requirements go on for 6 or 7 pages, single-spaced, of what needs to be delivered. I did another deal recently for a client where it was just three elements. So when you're about to deliver your picture, you must understand what it is that you have to deliver, and those costs need to be part of your budget. Because if they're not part of your budget, you won't be able to deliver, because you won't be able to create the elements. And if you can't deliver, very often you can't get paid. So you got to look all the way to the end when you first start. Excuse me. Okay, so let's talk for a second about sales agency agreements. Do anybody have any questions? Let's see. Here's one from Deborah. Can you waive pension and health for yourself by choice? If someone has health insurance, okay. No, if you are a member of a guild, you are required to pay yourself the minimum, and you must pay pension and welfare on that. If you are the producer of the picture and the writer of the picture, typically for the Writers Guild, you must establish that the financing doesn't come from your pocket. Because if the financing came from your pocket, you could be manipulating the system to create health benefits for yourself without actually engaging a third party's money. So if you are the producer, writer, director of your property and you are a member of the guilds, a third party needs to put up that money in order for you to have your services count under the guild agreements. So it gets a little complicated. What about using fiscal sponsorship for investors? Well, fiscal sponsorship is a little different. If you are using a fiscal sponsor, I've been involved with them only tangentially, but to the extent I understand them, someone gives, a quote-unquote investor makes a contribution to a not-for-profit organization who then gives you the money to make your film. In that case, that person giving the not-for-profit organization its money is not seeking a return. They are just making a donation. So in that sense, they're not looking for a return. So they're not really investors. They're making a donation. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's how you can get your film done, God bless, go do it. But it's not often the way that most of these things get done. So a sales agency agreement will say that typically the sales agent will take over the rights for the world ex North America. And in exchange for that, the sales agent will take a commission and an expense allotment. I've seen deals where the commission is 5%, and I've seen deals where the commission is 35%. The market tends to be between 15 and 25. And so that commission is important. Plus, something that sticks in my craw, if you have a film that a foreign sales agent is taking out and trying to sell at the various markets, the sales agent typically goes to every market. They go to Cannes, they go to AFM, they go to the Berlin Festival, and they go to other major festivals where they can sell the property. And that's their job. They have to go out and do it. But the sales agent will charge your film oftentimes a fixed high number as their expenses for going to the market. I have a problem with that because that's their job anyway. They have to go to the market or they can't sell anybody else's films. Excuse me, but they will often require that out of the money that they raise on selling your picture, the first $50,000 gets repaid to them to cover their expenses, and then they take a commission on the whole amount. Now, when you're financing a movie using pre-sales like that, and the commission is, say, 20%, the lender will often make the sales agent take only 5% at the time the deal is made, and the rest of their fee after delivery and the money comes in. Because otherwise, the financier is going to discount the value of the foreign sale by 15 or 20%. The sales agent is going to take its full 20% commission, and the value of the contract is practically half what it was on its face. So the individual, that's very often the lenders make the sales agent reduce their commission. So have I lost people? Is this going well? How are we doing? Can you thumbs up or thumb down? I see some people. Good? No? Boring? Okay. Good. Okay. Okay, so that's what a foreign sales agency agreement does. It's very important in getting your financing. Now, the other piece of financing that we all know and love are these tax credits that are typically available, in the United States in 37 states. They are available in London, in the UK. They're available in many other countries. Typically what happens is when a picture finishes production, there is a value created, and that value can either be a tax credit, which the picture then can use if it pays tax in that jurisdiction, or can sell to somebody who could use it, or it is a rebate. So at the end of the production, after you finish spending all the money, the state or government writes you a check, which of course is the most advantageous. So let's talk about two important states in the United States, Georgia and New York. New York recently reduced its tax credit from 30% of the qualifying below the line expenses to 25% of those expenses. In New York City, you must spend at least $1 million on your film to be eligible for that tax credit. And if you actually shoot outside the New York metropolitan area, you can get an extra 10% on your labor costs. So if you shoot in Ulster County, you can get 35% on labor, 25% on other qualifying expenses. New York also has what they call a post-production tax credit. If you shoot your film in New York, you're eligible for the production credit. If you shoot your film somewhere else and come back and do post here, you're eligible for the post-production credit, not the production credit. It's important to know the difference between the two. For example, music costs are not a qualifying expense on the production credit, but music costs are a qualifying expense on the post-production credit in New York. So when you go, New York also will certify the amount of money that you are likely to receive. And that certification is what you then take to a lender and say to the lender, I'm due to get this much money according to the New York State Tax Bureau. Will you lend money against this? And private lenders will, and there are some banks who will, and there are lots of other people who will do that for you. A couple of questions. Okay, does Long Island need $1 million minimum? No. So, what was I doing? Oh yeah, so you go and you borrow the money against this tax rebate. The challenge with New York is that it takes a long time for that money to get paid. And when you fill out the form, they tell you how long it takes. If the number is large, it takes 3 years to get the money back. So when you borrow against it, the lender is going to be aware of when they finally get their hands on that money, and your interest rate is going to go up for that period of time that you borrow the money. Let's compare New York to Georgia. Georgia will not certify the amount of money that you're going to get. But there are plenty of lenders who know enough about the Georgia credit to look at your budget and your expenses and say, okay, your 30% Georgia tax credit for qualifying expenses will be equal to X. And they will then lend you money based on that. But what happens if you, what happens then is that you know what the credit is going to be. Let's say the credit is $300,000, but you're an LLC that's never going to make any money. You have no use for that credit. you will have to sell that credit to somebody who might make use of it. So if you're in Georgia, you get in touch with a Coca-Cola company or another company and you say, will you buy my $300,000 tax credit? Clearly, they're not going to pay $300,000 for it because they could just pay the taxes. So they'll pay you a little less, say $270,000 or $265,000, and they will get the difference between what they paid you and the credit on their tax return. And that's how tax credits work. The rebate is you actually get a check. And there are lenders who get in the middle of that and create the money for your production. New York is a hybrid state. People call it a tax credit with a rebate because New York is unusual. If you have $1 million film and each investor put up $100,000 into your film and you have done your LLC properly, all of the losses that the film suffers will be passed on equally to the investors. So if I have invested $100,000 in that film and I'm due to, and the state's going to give me a $200,000 tax credit, but I, Mark Jacobson, happen to owe the state of New York $250,000 in taxes, I screw it up for the whole LLC. No one gets the tax benefit because the state of New York sets off what I owe to it against what the state owes to the LLC without regard to the amount that I have invested. So lawyers have come up with a way around that, of course. We create a subsidiary company of the LLC, which is a C corporation, which is not a pass-through company. Instead, it is a company that pays taxes on its own, unlike an LLC pays no taxes. And that company is the one that actually produces the picture. The LLC signs a production services agreement with the C corporation, and the C corporation agrees to spend all the money that the LLC gives it on the film. At the end, the LLC agrees to deliver the film. The C corporation agrees to deliver the film to the LLC, and the LLC then enters into all of the distribution agreements, and the money comes in and gets divided up properly by the LLC. But since the C corporation, which pays taxes and is not a pass-through, and the only investor in that company is an LLC, the C corporation can borrow the money and not be subject to the set-off with the state of New York. When they're finished with the picture, the C corporation dissolves because we don't need it anymore, and that's how we do it. There are no banks in New York who will lend against the tax credit without this structure. All of them do it that way. So it's important, it's good for me because there's extra legal work, but it's important for you to understand that if you want to use your tax credits. Now, with a loan, when you borrow money against a sales agency agreement, when you borrow money against a tax credit, the lender knows that the lender's only going to get repaid when the picture is delivered. So the lender wants you to make sure that the picture is going to be delivered. And they do that with a completion bond. It is an insurance policy that you're going to deliver your picture on time and on budget. And that's what it does. In order to have a completion bond in your film, your budget typically has to be around $2 million or more. And the budget must contain a very substantial contingency of around 10% of the items which will go over budget. For example, the script cost can't go over budget, so you don't need to add 10% on that. But the cost of actors and crew and film stock and locations all can go up. And so you need to provide a contingency for that. And the bond company will take a fee usually of about 2% of the budget. That contingency has to be set aside. And if you fall behind on the production of your picture, the bond company will be there by the end of that week and say, what's going on? Why are you falling behind? Not only that, the bond company is the one that actually releases the money to you. You've raised your $3 million for your picture, and you sign a contract with the bond company, and you give them the money. And then at the beginning of every week, they give you the money to spend on your film. But they hold the money because they want to make sure that it gets spent right. So if you're shooting on your 5th day and you're 8 pages behind, they're going to be there helping you to finish the film on time and on budget, not taking the picture away from you. If you royally screw up, they will take the picture away from you, but that's the last thing they want to do. They want to help you finish on time and on budget, because if they have to finish it, they have to spend their own money. So if you put your arm around them and say, you're my partner, help me finish this on time, you'll have a much better relationship with the completion bond than many independent filmmakers who are petrified of them. Don't be. They've done this thousands of times. They want you to succeed because then they make more money. So it's good for you to get a bond if you're eligible, and if you work with them, you'll be fine. Okay. So other things to consider. One of the questions was, what's the effect of the pandemic on this? Well, that comes up largely in the insurance category. Completion bonds are typically not issued during the pandemic. It is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get a completion bond, because if your key staff members get sick, they have to be replaced, and there's no way the bond company can actually ensure the delivery of the picture. I am aware of a picture shooting in the Caribbean starting this fall where there is relatively low infection rate. One of my clients is planning to shoot in Thailand where there is a relatively low infection rate. But my crazy client, who's doing a $100 million picture, will not be buying a completion bond. So that's his choice. The one in the Caribbean, they will be buying insurance and they will be bonding the picture. But the protocols and the difficulty in getting all of that done is going to increase the cost of the picture. And I see dozens and dozens of lists of recommendations. There are also guild negotiations going on. SAG, DGA, IATSE are all working together to try to create uniform standards so that everybody can get back to work. It's not going to happen that quickly. It's going to be very, very difficult. The other issue that comes up in on this pandemic issue really relates to the force majeure clause. A force majeure clause in a contract says that if an act of God happens or something happens that's out of our control, the contract may be suspended. That's the shortest version of it. So if there's a writer's strike later this year, many contracts will be suspended by virtue of the force majeure clause, because the writers will not be able to continue to work. That'll especially apply for television shows and things like that. But I'm closing deals now, and we are specifically exempting the coronavirus as an event of force majeure, because these deals that I'm working on are development deals, and people don't need to get together. You can do that separately. We can do Zoom calls and things like that. So we're providing for force majeure, but coronavirus is not an event of force majeure. And like any contract, you can negotiate anything. So that's one of the things we've negotiated. When the pandemic first hit, on the same day, I sent out 2 force majeure notices. One was simply accepted, never heard back from them, so the contract is suspended. The other, the agent went crazy and said, you can't do this to us, you have to do it, people can work, you have to get to work. And so my client said, okay, we won't enforce the force majeure position. So the clock is ticking on those agreements and people are working on them. So that answers that question. Another thing we need to talk about is music. For the Long Island Film Festival, I used to do a program on Saturday during the festival about music. And when I was the one on stage, there might have been 3 people in the audience, so I stopped doing it. But there's 2 things you have to know about music. One is every piece of music in your film requires 2 copyright clearances, not 1, 2. One for the recording and one for the underlying musical composition. Every piece of music has to have that. Even if you wrote it and you recorded it, both of those contracts need to be in place. If you bought the publishing rights or the underlying musical composition rights to a Rolling Stones song and you can't get the Rolling Stones version and you hire someone else to record it, you need a license both from the Rolling Stones publisher and from the band that recorded it. both of them. You have to have it. You have to have it for all media in perpetuity. People don't get that all the time. I was involved many years ago with films that were built around impossible to get music. Oh, it's going to be Led Zeppelin playing Rolling Stones. And if you don't get the music in advance, your movie is stuck. So if it's a music-based movie like Rocket Man, believe me, they bought all of that music before they got started. And if that's the nature of your picture, you need to do that before you get started. Distribution cash flow. We talked a bit about that. We didn't talk about collection agency managers. With a larger budget where you have multiple investors and you have multiple revenue streams like foreign sales agents and domestic distribution, you will frequently engage a collection agency manager. This is an independent third party. The two big ones are Freeway and Vintage. And what they do is they collect all the money for the film from around the world. Every dollar that comes in, every contract that you write says the money goes to the collection agency manager. And pursuant to a very heavily negotiated contract, they know how every dollar gets paid. It will say that first it'll say that they get a 1 or a 2% commission on everything that comes in. Then it'll say that SAG, DGA, WGA, IATSE, everybody gets their residuals. Then it'll say that the investors will recoup their investment. Then the investors will get their 20%. Then it will pay back then it will pay the individual investors their pro rata share of net profits, and it will pay any deferments along the way. And all of those things will get cut up in that collection agency management agreement. You won't have to do it, but you're only going to use that if you have a big budget picture where it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Form D. If you raise money for your picture, I remember someone talking about how they were filing papers with the SEC. If you raise money in a private placement memorandum, in a private placement, and you raise that money either from accredited or unaccredited investors, you must file a Form D with the Securities and Exchange Commission. It tells the SEC that you raised money. I filed them late, I filed them not at all, and I filed them on time. And I never heard from the SEC about any of them. But you need to do it. As a lawyer, I got to tell you, it's important that you do that. Okay, so I'm running out of steam here because I'm getting thirsty. So why don't you folks type in some questions that you must have about where we are. Minimum guarantees, great question. So if I am a film producer and I am going into production and I want to make sure that my picture has distribution, a distributor might say to me during the course of production or before production commences that when I deliver the picture, they will guarantee me a certain amount of money from the distribution of my picture. Let's say it's $1 million. And I can tell you a real live example. I had a client who got a minimum guarantee offer from a distributor on a picture we made last year of $1 million. My client said it's not enough. He finished the picture and turned it over to that distributor, and the distributor came back and said, I'll give you $750,000. So my client lost $250,000. He believes his picture is worth more than the distributor does. But the point of a minimum guarantee is that over a period of time, the distributor guarantees that you will receive a minimum amount of money. That minimum guarantee may also be pledged as collateral to a lender and used for the production of your film. Mind you, it gets kind of dicey here. If I finance my picture 100% with equity, the deal is they get their money back. First, they get 20% and they all share pro rata 50% of the net profits. But if I have managed to get, say, 50% of the picture financed by debt, by selling foreign sales and certain tax credits, The question that comes up from some filmmakers is, why should I still give the investor 50% of the net profits? Well, hell, he didn't put up 100% of the money anymore. He only put up 50% of the money. So why should he still get 50% of the net profits? It's a good argument. It's a good discussion. He didn't take the same level of risk. On the other hand, you as the filmmaker took away his upside because you sold the foreign rights. So he can't make any money on those rights. And his argument is, but for me, you wouldn't have anything. I get my 50%. That is a discussion that you have to have with your investors if you're going to go about selling foreign rights. Tax credits are frequently part of the financing. Tax credits frequently dictate where a picture is going to be shot over and above anything else, including where the picture is set, because you can build pretty much whatever you want indoors, and certainly New York can sub for Boston, or Georgia can sub for Florida, and things like that. So you can get away with all of that stuff. Deliverables cost. Yeah, I did mention that before. All I can say to you about deliverables cost is that you really need to make sure whatever the cost is in your budget. As I said, I've seen pages and pages and pages of stuff. And I've also seen less 3 little items. So it really depends on what you have going on there. What else? I don't know where to find investors in anticipation of that question. The place to find investors is to ask your friends. Don't ask people thinking they're going to invest. Ask people thinking they're going to know somebody, because it takes all the pressure off them. It takes all the pressure off you, and they might send you to someone who actually knows it. And if you give a good enough pitch and they don't think you're really pitching them, they might invest anyway. But don't try to pitch someone directly if you can avoid it. Just look for someone and practice. When you pitch, you got to practice on people. You have to give them the short version. You have to give them the long version. You have to tell them how you're not going to waste their money, how you really believe this is going to be a great film, and that you're really looking forward to a long relationship with them so they can work with you on the next one. But no one picture is anyone's ticket to success. Don't look at it that way. Spielberg was asked many years ago, why does he make movies? And the answer is to make more movies, because it's about doing many, many films. It's not about a ticket to success. It doesn't work that way. What are the other agreements that we need to do? Whoa, average attorney cost for $1 million film, $1 million. I wish I could say. It runs the gamut. It's hard for me to get involved without at least $15,000 or $20,000 in legal fees. But on $1 million film, there's an awful lot of work that I would look to have the producer do instead of me. I would create a series of form agreements for the producer to use for his crew. I would review the option agreement, which typically the producer has. I would review the chain of title. I would guide them on signing up with the guilds. But on $1 million picture, I can't tell you how much it's going to cost. It's really a function of what you do with your lawyer. There are lots of lawyers looking to get into this business. It's important you get someone who's done it before, because I've had to clean up other people's messes. A breach of I'm sorry, Jim, I don't understand your question. Could I go over the breach of contract that is necessary in a contract? I don't understand that.
Could I just unmute and just
Sure,
ask?
sure, yeah.
Just real quick, you just mentioned very early on there were 3 elements. You know, you mentioned that the parties that's got to mention it's a work for hire when you're writing a contract, but you also mentioned something about it's something about somebody could sue you or something like that. They're waiving something or whatever. It's just
okay.
that element that you mentioned.
There's 3 things that need to be in every contract that you sign for a film. The first is what you're going to pay and what they're going to do.
Right.
The second is that the contract provides that whatever they create is a work for hire for you as the employer for hire, and that's consistent with the Copyright Act. And the third thing is that they waive their right to sue you if you breach the contract for equitable or injunctive relief.
Okay.
You don't want them to be able to stop the release of your film because you didn't give them the proper credit, or you paid them $50 less than they were supposed to get, or something like that. Now, getting an injunction to release a film is very difficult. In order to truly stop the release of a film, the person who's trying to do that has to post a bond so that the filmmaker can recover damages from the person suing in the event the injunction was improperly filed. So it becomes very difficult and quite difficult. I will say, however, that I once was involved in a property where the contract provided that there would be no injunctive relief, and the contract provided that the writer who was bringing the lawsuit would have to arbitrate the dispute. But her lawyer, who I could only call a wise ass, filed a federal court action violating the arbitration clause and received a temporary restraining order for 8 days against us releasing the picture. But we got the whole thing dismissed eventually. Okay, Danny. On an ultra low budget picture, even lower than the SAG high-end low budget, on a picture under $100,000, what do I recommend? I still recommend that every person who works on your picture have a contract with those 3 elements in it, that you have a credit sheet, you make sure everybody ties themselves together on the credit sheet, and that if it's $10,000 and it comes from one person, you just do a joint venture agreement. You don't do an operating agreement with an LLC. If it comes from 2 people, you're going to need an LLC. Part of what I try to counsel people is to, the amount of work to make a $10,000 film is very similar to the amount of work to make a $3 million film. So it's, especially on the legal side, it's just you need another 0 on the other documents. It's very, very difficult to do that as a legal matter economically for anybody. So there are books out there. There's a guy named Mark Litwack, who I went to law school with, who wrote a book on independent filmmaking that has lots of forms in it. Forms can be the death of you if you don't know what they mean. Simply following a form can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't know why you're following it. Lawyers learn that early on in their careers, not to simply be a slave to the form, because sometimes it's just plain wrong. What else we got? You all look asleep. Those of you who are not still. Oh, there's Veronique. Hi, Veronique. Tim's up. Steven's up. Paul's up. What do we got, folks? That's it? No more questions? Come on. Winston's up. Time to talk about film financing a little more. Sure. What do you want to know? You can unmute. Ask away.
How to get it.
Oh, how to get it. Well,
I know it's talking to your friends and.
You know, I wish I knew, because I would be insanely wealthy if I knew how to find people who would invest. Oh, there's one more thing I should really talk about. I'm sorry I didn't mention this before. Finder's fee agreements. Don't do it. Your friend calls you up and says, I can get you $50,000 for your picture. I want you to pay me $2,500 when the 5%, when the 50,000 comes in, and you are desperate for the money. Don't do it. I can't tell you how important it is not to do that. Why? In our country, the only people who are authorized to get paid when you are successful in raising money in a securities sale is a registered broker-dealer. A securities sale is when I give you money and you do all the work, and then I get money back. Buying stock, lending money, buying units in an LLC. All of those are sales of securities. The only person who is allowed to get a commission when that deal closes is a registered broker-dealer, not a finder. Everybody uses finders. Don't do it. The reason is, if the film goes south And remember what I told you in the first 5 minutes? 80% of all pictures do not recoup their investment. So when the film goes south, if you have a pissed off investor, he has the right to reclaim all of his money from you personally and from the finder. Don't do it. So that's important to know about finders. Everyone will tell you, oh, we can get around it. We'll sign a contract that says you'll be the executive producer, and when the money comes in, then we'll sign the contract with you. That's a contract to pay someone based on the success of their raising money. It may be only as an executive producer, but that's the contract. I can't tell you how many times I've done it and how I've hold my nose and close my eyes and say, do it. So my advice these days is don't. Just don't do it. Because you never know if the investor is going to come after you and say, you're sunk. I had a very sophisticated client with Chinese financing, English financing, Swiss financing come to me and say, we found someone who's going to raise money for us. They want to sign a finder's fee agreement. And I sent them an article that says why they can't. And they said, okay, we're done. So it's really important. Okay. Yes, I have gone to AFM by myself. Many of my producer clients go by themselves. The key to going to a conference like that, like going to any conference, is planning. You must plan. You can't walk around without appointments because everybody else who goes there has appointments set up. If you have a property you want to sell, you want to get that property in front of certain people, you need to send them an email, ask them when they can see you, and try to pitch the property. It's very, very important that you organize it that way. For many years, I went to a music business conference in France in January called MIDEM. And I used to have meetings every 20 minutes for 5 straight days, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was exhausting, but it was wildly productive. So, excuse me, if you're going to go to AFM or any festival or any market where you want to meet people, you do that. I have a client who called me up the other day to talk about progress on a particular property. He told me he went to Berlin for the Berlinale. He had 50 meetings in 3 days. That's productive. In order to make it work, you have to work before you get there. You have to do it that way. The real question you're asking is where to find the money. Here's what is important to know. In my experience, raising money without some sort of name talent attached is insanely difficult. The investment is in you as a person. If you can convince someone that you as a person are worth investing in, then they will invest. Then if you're going to use some name talent in it, they have to be convinced that you are a person worth investing and that the name talent is going to add value to the property. So it's, in one sense, it's a little harder to sell when you have name talent because there's 2 levels of sale. But if it's just you, it's you are a hardworking person, you're going to turn what is $100,000 into a film that looks like $1 million because you're going to use this, that, and the other thing, and you're going to do it so well, people are going to get blown away by it. Someone is now asking about rights for video footage for a doc. Okay, so if the footage is this, now you're basically asking something about fair use, if you will. My hair's really long because I haven't gotten a haircut in 4 months. Sorry about that. If you are going to take a clip from a film and you're going to put it in your film, and it's a narrative feature, odds are you're going to need to clear those rights. And the contract will provide for you to be able to use the rights from that video in your film in perpetuity for the life of copyrighting your film. You'll have to pay a fee, and then you have to know whether by clearing that footage, you're also getting any underlying music rights that might also appear in the footage because it may not come with that video, and you may need rights from the individuals depicted in the picture, depending on the quality of the video. So if it's a newscast, you might not need the individual's rights, but if you're buying it from a producer and the producer doesn't have the right from the individual to sell it to you, you'll have to go back to the individual to get it. So you need to look at their chain of title to the video in order to do that. A question is coming out about what public domain is really. And public domain in the United States only relates to those works that were created before 1924. Anything after 1924, you must consider as under copyright in the US. Outside the US, it's very difficult. And every country has its own copyright law. So something that is public domain in the UK may not be public domain in the US. Something that is public domain in Canada may not be public domain in the US. Something that's public domain in the US may not be public domain in other countries. So it is a case-by-case analysis. However, if you look at the source country of the work and you learn when that work goes in the public domain in that country, odds are that it's public domain for the rest of the world. But you have to evaluate each one separately, one at a time. Same thing for a baseball game. You still have to do the same thing. Live music performances. If you are clearing, well, a live music performance on tape isn't really a live music performance, but a music performance of a band playing a song, you need to clear rights to the band for the visual image. You need to clear rights to the recording of the song, and you need to clear rights to the underlying music publishing of the song. You need a sync license from the publisher, a right to the recording, which is frequently a master use license, and the band has to clear as well. What else?
Mark, what about financing films to documentaries to PBS?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
PBS often does documentaries, and if you want to get financing for your own documentary, anything special you need to know?
Well, no. I mean, if you're going to do, I'm working on documentaries with clients and they're going out to raise money as if it was a narrative feature. The big difference in a documentary generally is the rights and the way you acquire the rights. I represented a music publisher, and I told you about this one, James. One of my clients is a music publisher, and there was someone who did a documentary about one of their writers and didn't clear any music at all. And there were 52 cues, and there were 15 separate songs used, and none of them were cleared. And I got a 15-page letter from the lawyer saying all of it is fair use. And my client didn't want to fight, so he gave the job to his client to fight it out with the filmmaker. The question about financing using PBS is sometimes PBS will commission you to make a film. And they'll say, when you deliver the film, we'll give you money. And yes, you can go bank the PBS contract and use it for financing for your production. But most documentaries are not done that way. Some are. Well, most of them are done, and then they hope to sell them to PBS or HBO or whoever else is going to buy a documentary. Ken Burns, of course, gets his financed in advance, but he's Ken Burns. Does that answer your question, James? I guess so.
Make a documentary on a chef for PBS. And then what happened is they gave it to PBS and they found out, unfortunately, that PBS was not only using it on PBS, but selling it to make money in BBC and others, and they couldn't get a penny because PBS said, we own 100%. So how does that work exactly?
I have no idea. I'm sure it's in the contract.
Okay. I didn't see it either, but they came to me and I didn't get a chance to work on it, but maybe they'll come back. I don't know, in the pandemic. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. Okay.
Have you happened to see the new SAG rights for COVID? What's going on with that? Have they settled on anything, do you know?
No, they're still working on it. They're still trying to figure it out. It's going to be very difficult. SAG, I have a good friend of mine who's a well-regarded producer. When I was emailing him and I told him about how the unions are all getting together to try to come up with a plan, and his response was, SAG is going to screw it up, don't worry. So they're very difficult to work with. If you film where someone has no expectation of privacy, walking on the sidewalk, do you need a release? What about filming of storefronts? Well, I guess the release question, the short answer to the release question for me as a lawyer is yes. You should always get a release. But if the person takes, simply because they don't have an expectation of privacy, doesn't mean you're entitled to film them. Because in New York, there's something called the right of privacy. And under New York civil rights law, sections 50 and 51, if you use a person's name or likeness for purposes of advertising or trade without their consent, they can sue you, and that technically is a misdemeanor. So simply because that person had no expectation of privacy at that place doesn't mean you can use their image for purposes of advertising or trade. Now the next question is using a person walking on the street in a movie used for purposes of advertising or trade? If you actually watch the picture Arthur, I think that's the film. Jesus Christ, I can't remember the film. There's a scene where I'm crossing Park Avenue in this movie, and they did not get my release. And I knew there was no basis for me to bring a lawsuit. So I had no expectation of privacy, but they're also not using my image for purposes of advertising or trade, so there's no basis for me to bring that lawsuit. Storefronts. Storefronts are a different issue because they may relate to copyrightable material in there. I represent a photographer, a very noted photographer by the name of Ruth Orkin, and her photograph called An American Girl in Italy is kind of iconic. It's a picture of a woman walking down the street in front of 13 men, and it looks like they're whistling at her, one guy holding his crotch, and it's really kind of an extraordinary picture. That picture once formed a backdrop for a scene in which a woman got raped. And my client was not very happy about that. So we took the view that her use of the picture evoked a feeling about the scene, and we sought and recovered some money for it. But that use of a copyrighted image sometimes is lawful and sometimes is not, because you get into the fair use issue. If you're filming a storefront as part of your walking by a particular store and you're not focused on it, it's quite likely that it could be fair use. But if you're actually focused on it and you're showing that logo or those pieces of intellectual property, you may have a problem. Okay, I think I answered that question. What if you're filming in a room that has Barbie dolls in it? Ooh, they're not part of the film, just on a shelf. Well, again, it really depends on the Barbie question. Really is answered depending on the use made. If the scene is featuring the Barbie films and they form a big part of it, I imagine Mattel might have something to say about that. Okay, 2 more questions, because I'm tired. Bueller?
So if you're driving past, you're doing a driving shot, but you're not focusing on anything, you're probably okay for storefronts and whatnot?
Yeah, probably okay. Crowd shots is often a very big question. If you're actually planning on having a crowd shot, when you have the people come to the crowd, you need to post signs that says you're about to be filmed. If you don't want to be filmed, you get lost. It says it in much nicer language, but that's what you should do. What is the biggest legal challenge in making a feature doc? Wow. The biggest legal challenge in making a feature doc is probably twofold. One is finding the money, and 2, deciding what you're going to use for fair use and what you're not going to use for fair use. I usually don't do fair use opinions. There are people who do it better than me, but the going rate for a fair use opinion is about $5,000 bucks. So you have to be very careful about what you're going to use for fair use. And that covers not on one particular use, but for a film. I have a client with a film that's been released, and he managed to get this film released without errors and omissions insurance because he told the distributor that he would take on all the liability in case the fair use position that he was adopting was wrong. I pleaded with him not to do it, but he did anyway. Do I have predictions for a post-COVID production world, contract-wise? Well, I think that the contract will focus more on force majeure issues. And I think that overall the cost of production is going to go up until such time as a vaccine is in place or there is herd immunity, because people aren't going to want to go to work and get sick and possibly die. So it becomes rather a big deal. I'm sorry, I don't understand this one. Can the subject decide to stop participating? The subject in what? Decide to, if they sign a release and they agree to participate and you're paying them money, then no, they can't stop. But if you're not paying them money, I suppose they can always stop. Okay, say you are writing a song that uses the melody of a public domain song. So you're writing lyrics to a public domain song. How would the contract be written for the composer? Well, there is no composer because the melody is public domain. So there's no one to buy rights from.
Okay.
Documentary, but that's only true in whatever country the song is public, the music is public domain in, right? Certain songs by George Gershwin are public domain in the US. Can you use non-SAG talent where the person agrees to volunteer their services? Are there Department of Labor implications? So if you are signing an agreement with SAG, you can only hire SAG actors. If you don't sign an agreement with SAG, you can use anybody you want. The person should not volunteer their services. You should not want someone to work for you as a volunteer. You should pay them minimum wage, if nothing else. And yes, those are the Department of Labor implications. The 14th Amendment constitutes, prohibits slavery, so you can't make someone do the work. It's also pretty hard to get work for hire language out of a volunteer. If you work on a new media low budget, can you hire both SAG and non-SAG? I believe you can. Also, many SAG actors these days are doing what's called financial core, which means they are eligible. I'm sorry, they are SAG actors, but because they elect financial core, which means they can't vote in the SAG elections, they can work on both SAG films and non-SAG films. Medical insurance responsibilities for cast and crew. Well, if the unions and guilds require, excuse me, my dog is bothering. 1 second. Stop snoring now, he has to get up. Medical insurance for cast and crew. If you hire union and guild folks, they require certain insurance and that will be part of the deal. If you're not using any crew, you don't have to provide medical insurance. I'm sorry, I don't understand Veronique's questions. What is the standard practice for paying the people you interview on a documentary? It depends on the documentary. One of my clients is a leading casting director. She just had a documentary done about her. We managed to get a fee of many thousands of dollars for her to be the subject of this documentary and a big piece of the back end. But many documentaries are done for free. Many of Michael Moore's pictures are considered documentaries, going back to the movie about Flint. He didn't pay anybody. They all got them to basically give releases on screen. So that works. Roger and me. Thank you, Jim. Are there any books you would recommend on this subject? Well, I think I did mention the one by Mark Litwack. Those deal with contracts in that way. There's a book by a friend of mine by the name of Tony Morris about filmmaking. Tony wrote that with Rain Dance. He's a UK lawyer living in Israel. And actually, we're doing a program on the difference between producing in the US and the UK on Thursday at 2 o'clock. If you're interested in that, that's $15, and the proceeds go to Rain Dance. Okay, so if you folks want to reach me, I'm very reachable. My email is mark, M-A-R-C, at markjacobson.com, markjacobson.com. My website is markjacobson.com, and my phone number is 516-459-0436. Just call. I'm pretty much always available.
Or if you didn't get it, contact me and I'll put you in touch with Mark. Mark, thank you so much for joining us here today and answering all our questions. I'm just going to throw out a little information for anybody who wants information on the Long Island International Film Expo, also known as LIFE, going into our 23rd year. We've already scheduled. It's not up yet because we've had to move the dates and we're still working on some things, but we do have the films that we want. But longislandfilm.com to find out any information about that. And Don?
Yeah, and the Queens World Film Festival is doing Queens World Wednesday night at 9, and we screen a block of films from the film festival, thematic, of course. And what we are doing is we are highlighting community action groups and what they're doing. No money comes to the film festival. If everybody wants to do something, it's all about whatever these organizations are doing, how you can help them do what they do. And that's what that's all about. Every Wednesday night, the program changes. That's where it is.
I have one more. I have to give a disclaimer. None of you are my clients until you actually sign an agreement, and nothing I gave you tonight is legal advice. And no attorney-client relationship has been created today. Sorry.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Don. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks, Deborah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.